Are you searching for the best in online Black radio? Then go to blacktalkradionetwork.com, helping you filter through the noise. Real talk, Black talk.
And that's really hard for any one person to embody at the same time, but that's part of what makes Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. so revolutionary for his time. And later that afternoon, I attended the City of Tacoma's Martin Luther King birthday celebration with guest speaker Melanie Cunningham, who remarked that in order for us to break past our color lines, we have to be willing to step over, to show love, and to make friends. She mentioned how the first part of building unity starts with us, starts with being willing to take that step. She was a little uncanny and said some things like, all of your friends on Facebook are the same complexion as you, you've got some work cut out. Or, if everyone you work with looks like you, you've got to talk to your HR department and get on that. And she really brought up how personal accountability is part of what helps build in collective progress. So in order for us to shape the world to be a better place, we have to be willing to look at self and examine what it is that we are doing to contribute or help deconstruct the problems that exist in our society. And that's what Martin Luther King Jr. is really about. He was able to build together a community of people towards a collective purpose, but with the sole inspiration that each of us embody as well, to say, I'm going to take it upon myself to work for something greater than me and to work for the common good. So as we listen to our speakers tonight, I'd like to challenge us all to also self-reflect and think about what it is that he or she remarks upon that we could also do to examine ourselves and change our behaviors to work for the common good. And with that, I would like to invite you all to rise as we're able, as we sing our Black National Anthem to begin the program. I would like to invite fellow student and BSC member Chantel Dozier with me on this stage as we sing verses 1 and 3, which is listed in your program on the inside.
Lift every voice and sing till the heaven, ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise as the listening sound. Let every sound rise the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Faith is the rising sun of our new day begun. Let us march on till victory is won. By the heart weary ears, by our silent tears, thou who hast brought us thus far on the way. Thou who hast taught thy light, let us into the light. Keep us forever in the path we pray. Bless our feet, stir from the places our God where we met thee. Bless our hearts, strong with the wine of the world we forget thee. Shall we need thy hand, may we forever stand, true to our God, true to our native land.
In 2009, the Associated Students of the University of Puget Sound and the Division of Student Affairs created the Keep Living the Dream Award as a way to recognize members of the campus community who have been exceptional leaders in the work for social justice in our community. The award was a particular vision of my predecessor, Yusuf Ward, Puget Sound's first African-American student body president. In its current incarnation, the award is presented by a committee of students and administrators to that student who best embodies Dr. King's legacy of work for inclusion and justice. This year's recipient was chosen from several excellent nominees representing a wide range of student passions and commitments. Any would have been a great choice for the award. However, we have committed to recognizing a single individual for this presentation, and so I would like to invite our 2015 Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Keep Living the Dream Award recipient to join me on stage. Will you please join me in congratulating Nikisha Renee Jones? And has been a strong leader within the student body throughout her college career thus far. She received multiple nominations from students, faculty, and staff, highlighting her leadership as president of the Black Student Union, her work as a resident assistant, and her particular engagement in helping our campus respond to both local and national incidents of violence against African American men and women over the last several months. From helping to raise funds for peers and community members struggling with injustice, to leading marches, to being incredibly supportive for peers and community members struggling with injustice, Nikisha Renee has been an exemplary model of social, spiritual, and transformative leadership Dr. King offered to our world. Nikisha Renee, on behalf of the Associated Students of the University of Puget Sound and the Division of Student Affairs, we are honored to present you with the 2015 Keep Living the Dream Award. To introduce the president of the University of Puget Sound, Dr. Ronald Thomas.
Thank you very much, Paige. And congratulations, Nikisha. Good evening, everybody. Good evening. Good evening. It's really great to see you all here together tonight on this very special evening. Let me extend a welcome to our special welcome to our honored speaker this evening, Rosa Clemente. We're very much looking forward to your remarks, and I promise not to hold you all too long. I'd like to also welcome guests from our community, and a very warm welcome also back to campus to our students and faculty who have been away for a while, almost a month now. Many of you, we've missed you. Campus seemed cold and empty without you, and rather dreary, and it's always great to see you return, particularly so at the beginning of our spring semester, in a brand new year, when all things seem possible once again, and we celebrate the life and work of a great American whose inspiring life embodies the principles of freedom and equality and justice, which are so central to our nation's values, even if seemingly so often absent from our nation's actions. That contradiction is what Dr. King's life was dedicated to addressing. This has been another year, as every year seems to be, when we've been confronted in dramatic ways with how urgent it is that the work of Dr. King be remembered, continued, and extended. Once again, we've seen all too clearly how much is yet to be done in advancing the cause of civil rights in our own nation and in the world, and on our own campus as well. How far we still are from the promised land of justice and equality of which Dr. King spoke so eloquently, and toward which he marched at such great cost. A destination we strive for, but which we, like him, still gaze at from a distant mountain. of our present moment from the other side of the bridge we have yet to cross. The word Ferguson has become in recent months a potent and horrifying symbol of the fact that we must repeat and remind and reiterate and restate and reaffirm such fundamental truths as the fact that Black lives matter, that people of color are people, fully enfranchised citizens, individuals with the same rights and worth as anyone else. Black lives matter. It's a powerful phrase, has become so, to be sure, as well as one that tragically seems so evident the truth that it should never have to be spoken. But it must, and it does. Black lives matter. I've been inspired in recent months by the work that our own BSU and Race and Pedagogy Initiative have done this year on our campus right here in responding to the events we collectively refer to as Ferguson or Staten Island, and by the prophetic power of this year's National Race and Pedagogy Conference on campus back in September, with which we began our first semester. That gathering of more than 2,000, which asked and responded to so powerfully the question, what now is the work of education and justice? What now, indeed, is our work? As we remember the giant legacy of Dr. King tonight and of Black History Month in the coming days, we will also be celebrating, as we know very well now, the 50th anniversary of Selma, certainly one of the landmark events in Dr. King's work and in the history of civil rights in America. As we all know as well, this year an Oscar-nominated feature film has been released on the subject to critical acclaim in honor of this semi-centennial. Now, we tend to think of the march from Selma to Montgomery, which took place, as a point of reference, just 2 years before I started college, and which I remember so well, to secure voting rights for people of color. We think of it as a major event in the long struggle. The facts on the ground were stunning and made Alabama the perfect place for this action to take place, a state where 50% of the population was African American, and yet only 2% of its registered voters. The images of the film, if you haven't seen it, recall to us the images burned in our memories of the horror of what happened to those who marched that day to the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, only a short distance from their starting point, when they were met and turned back with such brutal violence and force by state troopers, with dogs beaten, clubbed, gassed, bitten, bleeding, and bruised for merely expressing their desire to exercise their right to vote. The events of that day earned the name Bloody Sunday. But that first Selma March on March 7th of 1965, of about 500 to 600 marchers, led by John Lewis and others, was one of 3 marches that took place within that month from Selma, with only the third at month's end, finally reaching its goal, the steps of the state capitol in Montgomery, on March 25th. The Selma March, then, was not really a landmark event. It was a landmark process, a landmark series of events, an ongoing struggle itself that was and is part of a continuing struggle in which we are still engaged today, and in which Ferguson is only yet another chapter, and Michael Brown and Eric Garner only the latest casualties. Not even the latest casualties. After Bloody Sunday, and because of its tragic result, you'll remember that Dr. King led a second march from Selma only 2 days later on March 9th. This time, the group of 500 growing fivefold to some 2,500 protesters, out onto the same bridge where the bloodbath had occurred only 48 hours before. This time, they were permitted to cross the bridge, but rather than continuing on to Montgomery, Dr. King halted the marchers when they got to the bridge, and after saying a prayer there, he turned the marchers back out of respect for a court order that had prevented the protest, returning to the church where they had assembled and begun the march. This second Selma March was called Turnaround Tuesday, a more symbolic march indeed, but a powerful one that showed Dr. King's determination to remain true to his principles, to at once achieve the result and to remain nonviolent and to obey the law. That night, 3 ministers participating in the march were brutally attacked and beaten, one of them killed, stirring the outrage of people all over the region and the nation. Now, after Bloody Sunday and Turnaround Tuesday, Selma had become a national rallying point. Finally, once President Johnson provided the assurance of federal protection Dr. King had sought, and a higher state court overturned the earlier ruling and permitted the march, allowing the third and final Selma march to proceed from Brown Chapel in Selma over that same bridge yet again, this time all the way to Montgomery on March 21st. The third Selma march began with some 8,000 marchers this time, and swelled by the time it reached its destination over 3 days to 25,000 Christians and Jews, black and white, Alabamans and supporters from around the country, now escorted by federal troops rather than attacked by state troopers, and with President Johnson already having presented to Congress 5 days earlier a petition to approve the Voting Rights Act, which he had drafted and submitted, and which would make illegal the very obstacles to voting for blacks that many states had erected in the South. This time the march succeeded, and within months Congress approved that bill, and it was signed by the President. The 3 Selma marches then, one ending in tragedy, one in symbolic and silent protest, the third reaching its goal, achieving its objective. It's a parable of the long march to justice as an ongoing struggle. It's worth noting that much had been done before Selma to guarantee voting rights for African Americans. The Civil War itself, the several amendments to the Constitution during Reconstruction following the war designed to ensure the full citizenship of people of color, the Civil Rights Act of 1964, only a year earlier, and all the events in the long history of struggle in between. And since, we know what has and what has not happened, and how aspects of the Voting Rights Act have been recently undermined by a Supreme Court decision, how voting procedures in some states have again disenfranchised people of color. The story goes on from Bloody Sunday to Turnaround Tuesday to sit-ins in the White House and protests at the Capitol, and boycotts of Alabama companies to the 20,000-person march to Montgomery's Capitol steps, and the final successful passage of the Voting Rights Act, all of which were part of the landmark Selma March, and will continue as the story of Selma's continuing process and remains an ongoing and unfolding story that we live out today. Tonight, we'll hear from one who's a major figure in continuing that story, a story that neither began in Selma nor ended there. Rosa Clemente is a widely regarded Black Puerto Rican grassroots organizer, a hip-hop activist, journalist, and entrepreneur. Founder of Know Thyself Productions, Rosa has created 2 successful college and university tours, Dare to Struggle, Dare to Win, and Speak the Truth to Power. With degrees from the University of Albany and from Cornell, she's committed to scholar activism and youth organizing, and has become a leading voice in what we might call the next generation of the civil rights movement. Rosa has written for Clamor magazine, The Black World Today, The Final Call, and has been the subject of articles in the Village Voice, the Amsterdam News, New York Times, and Red Eye magazine. A writer and radio show host and scholar, she has appeared on CNN, C-SPAN, and Democracy Now!, Street Soldiers, and NPR. In 2001, she was a youth representative at the United Nations World Conference Against Racism in South Africa, and in 2002, was named by Red Eye magazine as one of the top 50 hip-hop activists to look out for. So we're looking out. In 2008, she valiantly ran for Vice President of the United States on the Green Party ticket. Rosa is still running, she's still marching on, and has many bridges that she will help us cross. As a daughter of hip-hop culture and its politics, it's fair to say that Rosa and her work are direct descendants of the civil rights movement. It's now generation. I'm honored to turn the stage and the microphone over now to Rosa Clemente.
I'm gonna need water. So somebody will get that for me. So since this is the selfie age, we must, right? Remember that. That's so narcissistic. The system is narcissistic. We have to celebrate life. Oh, wow. President Thomas, y'all are very lucky, right? Right. So many people still can't say Black Lives Matter. You know, a call for humanity. We're very lucky to have a president that is progressive, truly progressive, in an age of repression and reprisals and punishments. So give it up for your president. I would say that. Because that's what a leader should do. So I don't know if they can turn on the lights a little, just they're super bright. If you can, I'll be able to deal with it. But you know, I just want to thank all of you for being here tonight. I want to thank Dave Wright and Helen and everybody, all the students who worked to put this together. I know what it is to be a student leader on campus. I was a student leader, so I know how hard it is to put on programs, and it's always hit or miss. You never know what's going to happen. And you know, I think everyone here really did an amazing job, treated me so well and professionally. So I really want to thank, but I really, really do want to thank David, who reached out to me a long time ago. And from the minute I said, this is what I need, he's made everything happen. So thank you, David. And thank you, Helen, who's not here. And lastly, I want to shout out, well, is soon to be Dr. Benitez. Right? We're on I'm like, you gotta hurry up because I'm like right behind you. You started before me, so let's go. You gotta be doctor so I can come to your hooding and stuff. But me and Michael have been friends in like this cyberspace for a while and in passing and things. But recently we've been really seeing each other around. And after I ran for vice president, he was one of those people who had our back before and after the aftermath of daring to run against President Obama and then the Democratic Party. But you're very lucky to have someone like him on campus who gets it and you know, who's what we want, especially as people of color. Really, our role as academics is not to be academics. Our role is to be activist scholars or scholar activists. And I think Dr. Benitez, people say that's not good luck, but he's going to be there real soon. You're very lucky to have him as well, and I'm very lucky to call him a friend. So, thank you. I like to start with quotes. Each generation out of relative obscurity must find its mission, fulfill it, or betray it. That's Frantz Fanon. Powerful people cannot afford to educate the people they oppress, because once they are truly educated, you will not ask for power, you will take it. Dr. John Henrik Clarke. People get used to anything. The less you think about your oppression, the more you tolerate it. After a while, people think oppression is the normal state of things. But to become free, you have to be acutely aware of being a slave. Assata Shakur. Sometimes people hold a core belief that is very strong. When they are presented with evidence that works against that belief, the new evidence cannot be accepted. It would create a feeling that is extremely uncomfortable. What is that, you psych majors? No, there's not one psych major in here that knows that's cognitive dissonance. What's going on? And because it is so important to direct the core belief, they will rationalize, ignore, and even deny anything that does not fit in with that core belief. That's against Frantz Fanon. To me, one of them of modern time, hands down, one of the greatest thinkers, geniuses of the modern era. You really want to know what's going on in France and Europe right now? And not what we just saw 10 days ago, which I call the solidification of white power march that happened in France with all those leaders. Right, I'm gonna get into that. See, that's already people are like, what's going on? Can't say that. Frantz Fanon, watch a movie called The Battle of Algiers. And understand that eventually oppression breeds resistance. And unfortunately, some people act inhumane in their resistance. But most people are acting as only oppressed people should act, which is by rebelling so that they can be free as well. So I'm going to read an article. An hour ago, a group including poet Jessica Campbell, Talib Kweli, the Dream Defenders, Occupy the Hood, Hands Up, Lost Voices, and many others were chased like animals by the cops. As we ran to get away, we found ourselves on a small path on a bridge. Is that, can I look at the water?
He's working on it.
Oh, okay. Is that? Sorry. As we ran to get away, we found ourselves on a small path on a bridge, surrounded by police from various units and told to lie down and put our hands up. We were told if we did not stop moving, we would be shot. We complied. Let me be clear. We did nothing to provoke this. The fact that I have to write this says that lives don't matter. The first hour we were there, we merely walked and talked to folks. People were moving as they were told they had to and chanting. See, in the free speech area of Ferguson, you couldn't actually stand for more than 5 seconds and talk to anyone. Right before that, I had ran into members of the Pico Clergy Network. As a prayer vigil came together, thank you, I observed that the police seemed to be very agitated because people were being still. They were talking, they were in community. I stood watch. Talib and Jessica were in a circle with young people who began to notice particularly who Talib Kweli was. And it seems at that moment, the best of hip hop was about to pop off, what we call an impromptu cipher. I kept my eye on the crew we were with, the amount of police officers and National Guard, as well as private security that were lined up all the way to the back, were just twice, I was counting just as many protesters and organizers. As a longtime activist against police brutality, I have been trained by elders and by people in my organization, the Malcolm X grassroots movement, to always be alert, stay focused. So I was keenly aware when something shifted. I felt the energy, but I saw the police in the back start to move forward. I stepped to Talib and I said, something's about to go down. Within seconds, we saw the police raising their batons and getting into formation. As I wrapped up a conversation with Tremaine Lee of MSNBC, we saw a plastic water bottle being thrown. People kind of looked up, turned back to what they were doing, and the next thing you know, the police came at us like charging bulls, weapons drawn, screaming, causing mass confusion. Leave the area now, don't move. Jessica, Talib, and I grabbed hands and ran. Officers swooped in on us from all directions and locked us down with about 13 other people. Their threats, their eyes, postures, weaponry said it all. We have the power, we don't care how many cameras are here. I held Devin, one of the young brothers that was there with us, who struggled to control his breathing. He said, I'm choking. A cop told him, stop, I'll shoot you. I told Devin, try not to move, just lay still, I got you. The gun was right at his chest. I looked at the cop and said, please, please, he is not doing anything. I tried to record this incident with my phone, but the cop had his finger on the trigger. There were 15 of us laying on the ground, and all I could hear is the 2 white women behind me, face down, one bloody, one hysterically crying, please don't kill us, please don't kill us. I could feel Talib's hand on my back and Jessica behind me. We laid there until finally one black officer said, let them go. We got who we wanted. In my life, I've never been so terrified. I've been doing organizing and activist work for 22 years. As we walked away, the brother that was with us, there was a couple brothers that was with us, they were young. Devin later said to me, "Thank you. I think you saved my life." This is simply one account of a small group of us. If these young people of color with us last night did not know where they stood, they surely know now, and they were told just as much. But yet, although they are tired, they're still determined. They were deflated but not defeated. They were longing for direction and leadership that is not coming from an older generation. They are acquiring knowledge in this moment, and they are awake. They're breaking off the choke of respectability politics. While they were grateful for our president, they shared with us the frustrations of so-called leadership in our communities, and I cannot blame them. In the midst of last night's unrest, I saw many older people of color shaking hands and laughing with the police. Malcolm called this the house Negro. Some of them were actually angry at these little young brothers and sisters for standing up, telling them to go home. The young people replied, "This is our home." This might not be the most eloquent, succinct 500-word essay, but on the real, the moment I saw that rifle pointed at Devin, I looked at that white, bald-headed man and I saw his eyes. I feared the moment that so many Black and Latino and Latina men and women face potential death by the state. All I could think about is my daughter hugging me, telling me, "Be careful, Mommy, the police hurt women too." The split second you think your life is over is one of the most harrowing things one could ever experience. What is going down here in Ferguson in all my years of activism and organizing I've never seen. This is a war zone, a military occupation, and our children are cannon fodder. Devin and his boys got to go home that night. They get to go home tonight. I hope they always get to go home. That's Ferguson. That's one account of 15 of us. In a night when the police said it was the best night after 12 days of unrest. See, what I've learned since Ferguson, 187 days almost of sustained protest and action around this country, is that people of color were not meant to survive the American experience. We were not meant to survive slavery. We were not meant to survive the Middle Passage. We were not meant to survive colonialism. We were not meant to survive imperialism, genocide, apartheid, Jim Crow, sexual assault, rape, the CIA, the FBI, COINTELPRO, charter schools, gentrification, mass incarceration, and anti-immigration legislation, which is really anti-Latino, Latina-ness, and brownness in this country. We weren't meant to survive that. But now that we've survived it, and we resist it, the system of white supremacy, patriarchy, and capitalism does not know what to do with us. So they enslave us, imprison us, restrict our movement, take away educational opportunities, close down factories, impose racial surveillance, institutionalize racism in every institution, education, politics, economics, entertainment, sexuality. And when that fails to stop us, they kill us. Then they kill our young girls and our boys. Ayanna Jones, Tamir Rice, Michael Brown, Andy Lopez, Rakia Boyd. Or they make us political prisoners and prisoners of war like Oscar Lopez Rivera, Leonard Peltier, Jalil Muntaqin, Russell Maroon Schultz, David Gilbert, Mumia Abu-Jamal. Or they choke us to death, either literally or through economic injustice. And when that fails to stop us, they build walls to keep us out of our original lands. Those names, Oscar Lopez and Leonard and Jalil and Russell and David or Mumia, are the names you should know. See, we talk about political prisoners in America. These are political prisoners in the United States of America right now. Right now, all have done over 40 years. All of them coming out of the 50s, 60s, and 70s. Not civil rights, black power, brown power, red power era. David Gilbert, a white anti-imperialist that helped free Assata Shakur, sits in an upstate prison. Member of the Weather Underground, that put his white life on the line for black liberation. Right? So that's why I talked about that march in Paris, France. That was not about free speech. If you said, Je Suis Charlie, what are you saying? That you're about free speech and call satire when we know Molly Irish said that satire is for the rich. Satire is not for rich people to oppress more people, poor people, people of color. That's not what satire is supposed to do. That's the tool that we use to talk about the 1%, not the tool of the 1% to talk about the 99%. That entire paper is an anti-Muslim rag. That's what that is. That march was a solidifying of white power in this way. That those masters and mistresses of war that marched, you talking about free speech? There's been 119 people arrested in France since that march. All Muslim. That's free speech. Comedian gets arrested because of a Facebook post. That's free speech. But you know, France doesn't operate in that same way in terms of how we think about free speech. But even free speech in this country is limited. But I really think that march on a global level was saying, you want to say Black Lives Matter, we're going to show you how they don't matter. And we're going to start with these masters of war and these empire builders and the president of Israel leading it all while he's genocidal around Palestinian people. You know, today, in USA Today, it was reported that by 2016, get this, by 2016, 1% of the world's population will hold 50% of the wealth. Think about that. 1% of the world's population will hold 50% of the world's wealth. That's leaving out a lot of white people too. 1% is going to own half the world. Think about what that means. In this country, think about what that means, what it means globally. To me, that march was, in a way, a response to us claiming Black Lives Matter. That march was them showing us that Black lives don't matter to them, to that system. Whether they're Black lives in Ferguson or Black in Brazil, Black in Nigeria, Black in Puerto Rico, Black in France, Black in Australia, Black in Palestine, Black in Mexico. As we are crying and fighting for Black lives, they are telling us not only don't you matter, we will use everything at our disposal, including the state and military apparatus to silence you. And if not, we will torture you. And if not, we will drone you, your families and your celebrations. The killing of young Black and Latino men and women is nothing new. The first police in this country are found to do what? Round up runaway slaves. This is nothing new. There's a great hip hop artist. His name is Hassan Salam. He has a song called Jericho with another great hip hop artist, Immortal Technique. And he says, racism been stayed right on track and none of it changed because the president's Black. None has changed because the president is Black. Just like none of it will change if the president is Hillary Clinton, a mistress of war and patriarchy. And I'm going to say it right now. Be very careful, young folks. Be very careful about 2016. Question a presidential election that's going to cost $4 billion. Question the fact that it could potentially be another Bush or Clinton. That's called empire building. That's a dynasty, not a democracy. And why is that? Because everyone in Congress are multimillionaires. The average person in here could never run for office. Well, no, we could run. The potential of winning is so low because of the corporate money that's been infused, because of Citizens United, because our presidents are going to be sponsored by Coca-Cola. We've been talking about this in my generation for 15 years. And people say, you crazy, it's conspiracy. When capitalism is crumbling, as it is, it's not working for the majority of people in America, irregardless of color at this point. It's not working for the majority of people in America. What do you do with all them extra human beings? What do you do to make sure that people don't come together around an issue that can unite us? Economic justice, which is what Dr. King was talking about at the end of his life, which is why he becomes dangerous. When he's talking about civil rights, that's not dangerous. Civil rights movement was a movement to legislate. There's no resurgence of a civil rights movement. Any historian, and that's why we need to teach history, movements end, eras end. Dr. King at the latter part of his life was so radicalized because he was not only understanding justice in the terms of economic justice, he was also internationalizing himself in terms of what is going on around the world, what's going on in South Africa around apartheid. You know, what does it mean that, as he said, most black people in the South at that time, median annual income was $3,000. He was even questioning voting, right? So be careful, young folks, in 2016. When you start getting job offers around get out the vote. Get out the vote for what? For power and dynasty building? Half the people in this country who are registered to vote don't vote. I don't think that's because they're apathetic or stupid. Maybe not voting is a form of resistance. So as we're looking in this moment to transform society, only way we transform it is to transform how we think about things, how we question things. Why are there no oppositional forces? Why is the mainstream media a joke? You know? We don't even question the fundamental individual things in our lives. Let's say somebody in here don't care that Black lives don't matter. I don't know everybody in here, so I don't know. I'm sure there's somebody in here who's like, I really don't care. All right, well, you'll care about your student loan debt when Navia or Sally Mae starts calling you to get their money and you didn't get that job that you thought you were going to get, right? So we have to question that kind of stuff. Like, even question, why are you paying for higher education? It's a human right. It should be free in the most industrialized, developed nation. But we're the most in debt. There's 44-year-olds still paying their student loan. Me. There are people around. What is that? But it's interesting. Your generation is not even demanding jobs once you get out of college. You know? We got to question this stuff. For me, college is not a place where you just come and get a degree to get a job. First of all, anyone in college is privileged right now. I'm finishing my doctorate. I know I'm privileged. Most of my family's in the hood in the Bronx. Never had the opportunities I had. I didn't go to college to get a job. I went to fundamentally learn how to be a critical thinker, to question authority, to come up with innovative ideas, to be visionaries, not to sit in class and be passive, right? We got to think about these things. So in Ferguson, the reason that moment is so important it's a historical intervention into what had been happening until then. According to the Malcolm X grassroots movement, and a report that some of us worked on, and you've heard the phrase every 28 hours, that comes out of a report that I was part of getting out into the ether, the world. We wrote the report in 2012, it came out in 2013. And what we found in this report is that every 28 hours, an African-American man, woman, or child was being killed by law enforcement, security guards, or vigilantes, aka like George Zimmerman, like him. And as we're going to update this report to add Latinos and Latinas, as well as Muslim men and women, we're going to see that number potentially drop to every 16 hours, right? People are like, that's a crazy number. Well, in Brazil, it's actually every 6 hours that an Afro-Brazilian young person is shot by the police, right? So this is not that this has not been happening. The turning point in Ferguson is that they also let Michael Brown lay out there for 4.5 hours in front of people. But also Ferguson, where it is, the fact that it was a lot of what we call sets, some people call gang members, that were the first ones that went to the police station and were confronted in such a horrific manner by the militarized police. So you know that a lot of these police are militarized because after 9/11, the country lost its collective mind and went and bought weaponry and is giving weaponry to, St. Louis and Iowa and Utah. And nobody should have it, period, at this, but smaller cities, right? So that response from Ferguson, where it's young people, it's homeless young people, then it's queer young people, then it's women on the front lines. And then for days we're seeing images of the US, basically the National Guard, tear gassing American citizens. But we've seen that before a little bit in the 50s or 60s. That's why you need to go see Selma if you haven't seen it. I mean, you should know this history, right? But that Ferguson moment also broke this traditional way and this thing we call respectability politics, right? So I'm not going to curse as Rosa. I'm just going to basically tell you what so many young people were telling us, right? So basically when we were down there, I mean, obviously we heard F the police a lot. But there was a moment where some of the older leaders in the community or whatever were like, we have to pray, and the young people were like, F your moment of silence. And I was like, oh, this is real different than I've seen. They just said F your moment of silence to the minister. We're popping now, right? Like, respectability politics is gone, right? The idea that the way we demand our humanity as Black and brown people for other folks, Latinos that might not have their racial consciousness raised yet. If you haven't, you should by now. But that idea, right, like, we're not asking anymore. We're not voting anymore, rejecting voting, rejecting all the traditional things, right? Because where has the traditional ways gotten us? You got a fourth generation of mostly African American Latino youth heading into the prison system still. And when you talk about this idea of policing, right, they were like, if the police like they police in white communities, we'd be all right. But although these killings happen, like the numbers I'm giving you, and these are the things that bring our attention to policing, you have to understand, in communities of color, we are under occupation by the police. Okay, I've lived in the hood, I grew up in the hood, and I've grown up in middle-class, rich suburban. I understand clearly the difference in policing. But in the last 10 years, this idea of policing everything we do, Everything, including our bodies, how we speak, what we walk, how we talk, everything is policed. And it's policed from the minute young people are leaving their building, their home, to school. School is the worst than you coming out of school and trying to get home safely, right? This is the daily kind of occupying force that young folks of color feel they're under. Not only young folks of color, okay? Because Eric Garner was not young. And every victim of police brutality is not young, and every victim of police brutality is not a black man. Ayanna Jones, 7 years old, killed by the Detroit police. Tamir Rice, did you see the video? You need to see the video of this stuff. Because I don't think people understand that these police came out and within 2 seconds shot a 12-year-old in a park. But the executioner and mass murderer in Newtown, not Newtown, the Colorado thing, you know, they took him in alive. He's going to trial. Not that Michael Brown and them were criminals. You know, and I know some people all say, well, he stole this, he stole that. Who cares? I don't care if he had punched a woman, carjacked somebody, and shot somebody. There's something in America called due process. But apparently when you're not treated as an American citizen, you can just be executed by the police with impunity. That's what happened. Then on top of it, these cops that keep killing don't even get arrested. We can't even get a trial. Not that that's what people are looking for. So that's what these young people were seeing, history. They're not coming out of this out of a vacuum. I really feel the need to have to explain that, right? Because people will so degrade, and it's not just like the Fox News or the conservatives. You have liberals questioning. Well, were his hands up? Who cares if his hands up? He was chased like an animal and shot in the head. The autopsy, was the autopsy lying? Did we not see Eric Garner being choked to death saying, I can't breathe 13 times? Did we not see what happened to John Crawford at Walmart? Do we not see that George Zimmerman walks away and then what? The dude just got arrested last week for what? Assault or whatever. Right? When are they going to, this dude's never, he's like a super, it's amazing. He's been arrested or stopped by the police 6 times since he got off for killing Trayvon. Think about that. Now let me say, George Zimmerman is Latino. He's Peruvian. That's a whole different level of conversation around that, what that then means to be Latino, because if that's Latino, I know me and Michael and other cats, that's not the Latino we're talking about. Right? But he's acting at the behest of white supremacy, essentially, you know? So, as Dr. King says, where do we go from here in terms, what's my time frame? 5 minutes, okay. In terms of, no, I mean, I can keep going. I was checking in. So this idea of economic justice is so critically important. In a time where so many people in America are just struggling to live, you know, just really struggling to live and pay rent and eat and make sure that their family's okay. Voting and where we're at and what that means and what electoral politics look like, what it can it deliver anything anymore for the people. I don't know. I do know that, as Dr. King has said in one of these, this new undiscovered speech by Pacifica Radio that just aired a couple of days ago, that he did in London, he was talking about the devilishness and the wickedness of now having the vote, but then the vote being so hard to attain. And here we are, right, in 2014, and what have they done? Eviscerated the Voting Rights Act and institute all this redistricting as well as instituting IDs, right? What does that mean? The easiest thing one should be able to do as a citizen is go vote. It should be a national holiday. Just go vote. Show up, you vote. That's it. But you know, that's power. We talk about like layers and systems of power. And then the illusion that there's democracy. And that's what it's really about, the illusion that there is. So, what we've also seen during this Black Lives Matter is I'm often surprised when people are like, oh my God, white people are marching. I'm like, well, kind of if you look at history, right? Especially in the 60s and 70s, there have always been not white liberals, but white anti-imperialists or white progressives or organizations that stood for third world people, black and brown folks and indigenous rights and all of that thing. But for a younger generation of white allies, as people like being called, I like the fact that people are talking about white privilege. But, if that's all you're doing is talking about it, and you're not willing to give it up, then what are you really talking about? And what does it mean to give it up? What does it mean to have a personal sacrifice? What does it mean to be a white person that says, I'm riding with y'all? I'm gonna step aside, I'm gonna ride with y'all. Or if not, how do I work within my community to raise the consciousness in my community? How do we understand that there is shared histories of resistance of people who are radical in this country? See, those are important things, those are important histories to share. We have to name the system we're under. And we're under a system of white supremacy, capitalism, and patriarchy. And we all partake in it, especially the capitalist one. So when I go out tonight and I leave a tip, I'm partaking in the system. But I'm going to acknowledge it. It's a high contradiction. I'm going to acknowledge it. But every day, I'm actually in the process of trying to dismantle or transform that in any action that I'm a part of or any organizing effort. And we have to look at this moment as not a new civil rights movement. Oh, I'm so tired of that question. I'm like, no, this is not a new civil rights movement. First of all, this is a movement for humanity. Our humanity as black people globally all over the world. It's not about public policy. We have so many laws on the books, they never get applied. Right? We have to say that soon America will be a majority country of black and brown folks. But we also have to be clear that that could just very well mean we're moving towards an apartheid state of a majority group of people ruled by the minority. And even within that minority of white collective people, there's a 1% ruling that white collective as well. That's the next level we have to go to in terms of how we have these discussions. One that is a majority people of color ruled by the minority white collective, but even that white collective will end up leaving its, that 1% will end up leaving its own white poor and white disenfranchised and white marginalized communities. Because as the American empire is on decline, the capitalistic system, even as parasitic as it is, will accommodate for the ones that are not the one, will accommodate the ones that are the 1%. And then it won't accommodate for the rest. That's how they keep the majority of us divided. Frantz Fanon talked about first we recognize. This moment is a contemporary moment that we can name as the era of civil rights, not just civil rights movement, but the era. Then we resist. We can look back at the black-brown power era of the late 60s to early 70s, and then we rebel. This is where we're at right now, what Fanon's talked about, recognize, resist, and rebel. We're in the rebellion stage. The Black Lives Matter is a rebellion. It's not a hashtag, it's not a selfie, it's not a tweet, it's not a Facebook status, it's not a trend. For me and many people in the Black Lives Matter movement all over the world, this is our lives. It should be all of our lives. But we know all too well that white lives matter. That's why we have to say Black Lives Matter. But then all of us have to do something big every day. Every day, I try to expose the system. That's my job as an academic, as a scholar, as a journalist. I have to expose the system. I have to be a critical thinker about how to transform that system once it's exposed. And as W.E.B. Du Bois taught us, then we strike a hammer to the system every day. It's the least, especially that Black and Latino people in this country could do. We only enjoy the freedom we have because of resistance, not because of liberal policies. We only enjoy it because of the sacrifice of our ancestors, our elders, our freedom fighters, our war veterans, the veterans we call OGs, the one that survived the assault known as COINTELPRO. We have to be unapologetic, unafraid, as Shirley Chisholm said, unbossed. We have to say we will not compromise, we will not bend, we will not be passive. Frederick Douglass said, if there is no struggle, there is no progress. It's my favorite quote of Frederick Douglass, and I'm surprised that people really don't know sometimes who Frederick Douglass is. I gotta find a quote. That's how I always end every speech. It's such a powerful quote. No progress without struggle. Let me give you a word of the philosophy of reforms. The whole history of the progress of human liberty shows that all concessions yet made to her august claims have been born of earnest struggle. The conflict has been exciting, agitating, all-absorbing, and for the time being, putting all other turmoils to silence. It must do this or it does nothing. If there is no struggle, there is no progress. Those who profess to favor freedom and yet depreciate agitation are men and women who want crops without plowing up the ground. They want rain without thunder and lightning. They want the ocean without the awful roar of its many waters. This struggle may be a moral one, or it may be a physical one, or it may be both moral and physical, but it must be a struggle. Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did. Find out just what a people will submit to, and you have found out the exact amount of injustice and wrong which will be imposed upon them. And those will continue till they are resisted with either words or blows or with both. The limits of tyrants are prescribed by the endurance of those who they oppress. So we say, Black lives, they matter here. 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 I can't say black lives, they matter here. 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 Peace, everybody.
Time tonight is almost over, but the work continues. The work begins anew. The work lives in us and around us and on this campus and in Tacoma and in Pierce County and in each place where we speak up or act up or stand up for social justice. As we close, I want to offer a few words of gratitude. Many names are listed on the back of your program, and Rosa has already thanked a number of those that I was going to shout out to. I want to add Serena Ramsey, who is my prime co-conspirator in this case. Someone text her and tell her I did that. Serena's at conference right now, but she and I and Michael and Paige and Mike Sagawa are kind of at the core of the MLK planning group each year, and it is a joy to work with each of them in this effort. I also want to recognize the student voices and musicians and those who gave up their time on this first day of classes, right? To be here and be part of this. Thank you all. not the end. We know this, we knew this at the Race and Pedagogy Conference, where it was about the work beginning and what now. We've known this when we had our die-in in the sub. We've known this as we've wrestled and struggled and talked and cried. This is not going to resolve the work that has to happen in our community. In your program, there are some additional upcoming events. I won't read them out, but over the next 4 weeks, we have 3 additional speakers that are coming through the SWOPE committee, through CICE, connections through Michael and others. Please come and join us for this and keep the conversation going. This is a rich place, and as Rosa was talking about critical thinking and the need to challenge and interrogate and work through the systems that we bring with us. I was thinking of being a student here 20 years ago, how important that was to me and being taught that challenge. That was true then, it's true now. For all of us who are part of this community, whether we're faculty, staff, or students, neighbors, and friends, we need to be asking these questions. As we have shifted this program over the years, instead of ending with a closing blessing and having it feel like a church service of some kind, we instead end with the sending forth, with that invitation to get out of here and do something. To go forward from the words and the challenges and the celebrations and the moments that we've had in this short 90 minutes and live this semester and this life as though we are going to make a change. That is, for me, the heart of the legacy of Dr. King. That is a part of what I hope we are about as a campus community. That's a part of what I heard in Rosa's challenges to us and to our society. So go forth from this place of passion and song, of tears and hopes and possibilities and frustrations, and live not for a distant dream or a pie in the sky, but with a hunger for justice now, a thirst for change now, and through it all with the knowledge that none of us is in this work alone. May we go not in peace, but in passion. Thank you.
I'm a victim, brother.
No problem. You're a victim.
I'm a victim of 400 years of conditioning.
Shut up.
The man has programmed my conditioning. Even my conditioning has been conditioned.